Hey, y'all. Okay, so today we're talking about codependence. Now, before you turn it off and you think, well, that's not me, I wanted to explain that Terri Cole, she's a therapist, and she wrote a book called Just Stop. And it's not just about codependency, it's about high functioning codependence. And let me tell you, a lot of us in healthcare went into healthcare because we really enjoy helping other people. And that's fabulous. But what I see with burnout is that sometimes that willingness to help turns into, by George, I'm going to help you. I'm going to take on this burden. You need to appreciate me. I'm going to be like a little resentful if you're not appreciative enough. And I'm going to take on everybody's problems around me because that's who I am. I'm a problem solver. I'm a fixer. I'm a helper. All right, so if that stung just a little bit, let me tell you, I'm right there with you. I have dealt with this my whole life because I was labeled, thanks, Mom, as a peacemaker in our family and a helper. And just, anybody had a boo boo, I was there to fix it. And you get a certain amount of reward for this, especially as a kid. Like you are praised if you're the one who's the helper in the classroom. You are praised if you're the one who can help problem solve. And these are all, they can be good things. So just like any character trait, sometimes your best trait can also be to your detriment if it gets out of control. So, if you are feeling overwhelmed or stressed out or burned out, I want you to listen to this episode and just see if any of this sounds like you. And again, this is based on Terri Cole, Terri, her book, Too Much. And if you're listening, Terri, I would love to have you as a guest so I can ask you all these kinds of questions. Okay, so she says that one of the signs if you're a high functioning codependent is you go above and beyond until it hurts. Does that sound like any of you? And the funny thing is, I sent this podcast to my sister-in-law, and I always listen to things that I'm like, oh, not she specifically, but I'm thinking, oh, this person needs to hear this. And my sister-in-law responded immediately. Well, she listened to, I guess, a little bit of it. And she said, this is so you. And a lot of it is. And right now, my stress, burnout, and overwhelm, they're pretty under control. But when I'm not doing well, that's when I tend to latch on to other people's problems too. And then it just piles even more on my plate. Okay, so are you going above and beyond until it hurts? What this may look like in your clinic or your office is that you are volunteering when somebody can't come to work, you're working their shift. When they need somebody to pick up an extra day at a satellite clinic, you're like, okay, I'll do it. When they need somebody to work in a patient, you don't even think about it. You're just like, I'm the helper, I'll do it. Okay, now you may be doing these things and you're like, but that's what's expected of me. How do you feel about it? That's the question. Are you truly happy to help? It gives you a warm glow in your heart. Or are you doing it at the sake of your own energy and sanity? And then later, are you reflecting on it and getting a little bit bitter and resentful about it? Are you keeping score? Are you like, God, I took the last 3 patients that walked in the door? Because that's also a sign that you are saying yes, you're being a little bit codependent. In other words, you're not doing what you really want to do. You're doing what you think will make other people happy so that you don't have to deal with their disappointment. The other way I've seen it show up, at least in my own life, is that other people's, my happiness depends on other people's happiness. In other words, I'm only as happy as whatever mood my husband is in. I can only have as good a time on vacation as my kids are willing to behave. Does that make sense? If they're misbehaving, if they're grumpy, then gosh, that ruins my whole day. And it's my job to sort of lift them up and make them have a better time. And it's at the sake of my own joy. Are you jumping into damage control? Think about that. Are you always the first to jump into damage control? I mean, really, this is us, y'all, healthcare providers. Are you overly self-sacrificing? Think about that. Yourself, you are sacrificing yourself. You're like a martyr. You're always like, woe is me. I guess I'll be the one to clean up the mess. I'll be the one to clean those dishes in the lunchroom that nobody's cleaned. I'll be the one to take the labs because nobody else has done it. I'll be the one to put an extra spot on my schedule because we're getting behind. We need to open up some new spots. Are you auto accommodating? Like you don't even think about it. You just immediately adjust yourself to fit what other people need. And the example Terry gave of this one was like on the airplane, you're not even asked to move your seat, but you overhear a couple chatting and they're not sitting together, and you just automatically ask if you can switch seats so that they can be accommodated. And like they didn't even ask you to get up in their business. Are you auto advice giving? And then you might get a little annoyed when people don't take your advice. Like when you see somebody in need on social media, because people put all kinds of personal stuff on Facebook, and then you see that and you're like, oh gosh, they need a new hot water heater. Maybe I should donate. I should email everybody on my neighborhood listserv and see if anybody has, something they could give this family. And like they didn't ask for your help. You are just you're just auto accommodating and auto advice giving and just like doing it. Are you hyper vigilant when it comes to noticing problems and then feeling like you need to do something about it? If I'm speaking to you, hyper vigilant with problems. So your ears just kind of pick up. You're in a room, you're at a, Thanksgiving, and you just you're hyper vigilant. Hyper vigilant. You're scanning the room, your ears are noticing who's in distress. And these are all good traits. Like it makes you a highly sensitive, empathetic person. But if you're being hyper vigilant when it comes to other people's problems, it can detract from your own happiness. Like you can become so burdened with other people's problems that you sort of forget to take care of yourself. When I was in a totally different job, not this one, I realized, it took me a while, but I realized I was walking on eggshells. So that's another, like people will use that phrase. I walked on eggshells, which means I was being hyper vigilant. I was noticing my supervising physician's moods. I was auto anticipating what might throw her off. Oh gosh, there's that lady that she doesn't care for. There's that problem patient. Oh, there's 4 surgeries in a row. Oh my gosh, she's back from vacation. What if her mood is off? She didn't ask me to do this. This was all on me. This was me not even deciding, but this was me just doing it. And then over the years, it built into burnout and resentment. So really look at what you're doing. How do you feel about it? If there is even slivers of bitterness or resentment, then that's a sign that you need to read Terry's book, figure out how to put up some boundaries, but also how to stay on your side of the street and take care of your own problems. This is kind of going into the hope territory, but I would say don't say yes right away. If you think you're a high functioning codependent, don't say yes right away. I'll give you an example. When we had been married a few years, didn't have kids yet, we lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Washington, D.C. And somebody from Montana, we'd lived there, somebody reached out and said, hey, I have a girl that I know, and she's trying to do an internship in Washington, D.C., but she really doesn't have the money to afford somewhere to stay. Do you think she could stay with y'all for the summer? And I didn't hesitate. I didn't I just immediately thought it's my job to it's my job to do two things: take care of this girl that I don't even know and let her live with us, and it's my job to not disappoint the person who's asking me this. And so we had a cat, we had a sofa, and she just lived in our living room. And yes, it was awkward, and we'd get up in the morning and like she's asleep, and it turned out fine. This girl was from Sri Lanka. She did speak English, but it was one of those things where later I was like, what was I thinking? Like, why would I say yes? Come live with us. So, yeah, the other thing that this brought to mind was, I've told y'all, my husband went through a pretty bad depressive episode when we decided he would move to Montana before me, 3 months before me, and live by himself while I finished up a work contract. And he got really, really depressed, and it was scary. And I thought it was my job to save him because I'd never really been around anybody who was depressed. And I thought, if I can just cheer him up enough, if I can just basically take everything that he's not able to be right now and be that, then I'll save him. And I think this is, again, a lot of us healthcare providers get into this role. And what fed into it was he did get better. And so it sort of validated what I had in my subconscious, that it was like me who saved him. I had helped him carry him over the finish line. And it's not fair to other people. I know this now. It is not fair to other people because they have the right to succeed and fail. They have the right to have a bad day. They have a right to deal with their own crappy schedule or deal with their own, depression. It's not saying you can't be there for somebody who's depressed or suffering or has an addiction. Like, you can be there for them without taking on their burdens. It is not your job to carry them on your back, especially when they don't ask you to. Because, Terri says the older we get, we have less bandwidth. When we're younger, a lot of times we can take on this other stuff. We can take on the problems of the medical assistants and the front office, and we can, be the hero. But the older we get, like, you have less room on your plate, just less bandwidth in your brain. And so there is a cost to you taking all this on. I see it now with my kids. They're almost 13 and 17. And my son had been complaining about a college counselor not getting back to him about a question he had about dual enrollment. And he said, I've emailed her 3 times. And I thought to myself, I should get involved. He needs my help. He did not need my help, and he was not happy when I emailed the counselor and said, he's having a hard time getting in touch. Should we schedule a meeting? Because it turns out she actually had emailed him back, and he just hadn't gotten around to responding. And he asked me in a very nice way, like, next time, please let me handle it. Okay, I'll give you another example with my daughter. So you do have to be a little codependent with your kids when they're little. I mean, they depend on you. The definition of parenting is like codependency when they're little. But the older they get, you need to let them carry their own burdens. They don't need a piggyback ride from you. But I'm still learning that lesson, which is why I'm talking about it today. So my daughter didn't score the best in math. Not terrible, but not amazing. And so I decided she needed a tutor. They offer free tutoring after school. So why wouldn't you take advantage of this? That's what my head's saying. Like, I'm already problem solving for her. Like, don't worry, we'll get into tutoring 2 days a week and we can ramp it up if we need to. She didn't ask for this. She didn't want this. She was perfectly happy with her math grade. And so I sent her to tutoring yesterday, and it actually wasn't tutoring. It was more, you just kind of like an after school, sit in the cafeteria, and if you have homework, you work on it. There wasn't really any tutoring going on. And so when she got home, she was like really upset with me, and she was like, let me fail. If I fail math, then I'll see that I need a tutor and I'll come to you. And I had to pause because I was like, you know what? That is a good point, Ollie. I will let you I will let you try that. I'll stop trying to take on your problems because, like I said, it's really not fair to other people when you do this. Um, Let me see if I had anything else. Oh, when you're overly invested in other people's issues. Does this ring true for anybody? I was overly invested the other day when I went to yoga, and I was looking at these spots, these parking lot spots that are supposed to be blocked for the pharmacy. And a lot of old people use this pharmacy, and there's never enough spots to park in for the yoga studio. And so I parked. I really shouldn't have even been parking. I just gave myself away. I live very close. I can walk. But on this day, I drove and I did park at the grocery store and I walked. But I noticed that some people who got there after me used those reserved spots. Now, I wasn't thinking like my husband thinks. He's more of like a public policeman, like he just don't wants people to follow the rules. For me, it was more like I was thinking about those old people and where would they park and what are they going to do? And, they didn't ask me to be like the parking lot monitor. Nobody needed me to do that. The pharmacy didn't even open until a few minutes before the class ended. So chances are nobody would even be coming to that pharmacy. But it's amazing how much mental energy during that class, instead of being present on the mat, thinking about yoga or my breath or whatever, I was thinking, gosh, those poor old people, maybe I should say something. Maybe I should, whatever, like butt out, Hope. So if you're doing this, ask yourself, what is it costing me? What is it costing me in terms of my energy, my happiness? Does this other person know that I'm helping? Do they want my help? Did they ask for my help? And if the answer is no, then see if you can take a little step back. You don't have to completely shut the door on that person, but maybe tiptoe backwards a few steps and just see how it feels to sort of let that go. I bet it will open up more space in your life, more time in your life. And don't say yes right away when somebody asks you to do something. Otherwise, you may have some girl from Sri Lanka living on your sofa. All right. If you're in this boat, then don't worry. There is hope because I'm proof I'm getting better. And just tune in next week. If you want to share this episode with somebody, read Terri's book. And I have enjoyed talking to y'all. I'll see you next week.